And welcome to Catholics Coast to Coast, where we get to deepen our walk with God by really diving deep into the conversations happening at Podcast Central at EWTN.com/radio. I'm Ace McKay, always ready to help really to kind of find out what it is that we need to do to understand God's Word. So why not dive straight into this week's Mass readings with this week's Word on the Word.
In this Sunday's Gospel, we hear about the healing of the leper. He knelt down before Jesus and said, "If you will it, you can make me clean."
Jesus touched him and said to him, "I do will it. Be made clean."
The leprosy left him immediately, and the man was cured.
What stands out to me is how the man approaches Christ. He's filled with faith and accepts the fact that he may not be healed. I think it's difficult to really want something and also understand that you may not get it.
And this can be a hard reading for people to hear, especially if they've been praying for a miracle for a really long time, and it feels like God's ignoring them.
I'm sure one of you watching has had a health issue or been given a cross that seems too big to carry. And it can be really frustrating to call to God for help and not get an immediate answer.
But God does see you, and He hears your cries. He desires to heal us and make us whole again. And even if we're not fully healed in this life, He will make us whole in the next.
This week, we challenge you to reach out to someone you know who's really struggling. Ask them if you can pray for them, do something for them, or both.
And catch us next time.
Bye.
Toodles.
Well, a better understanding and definitely something that can help lead us into Mass for the weekend. That is Word on the Word. If you want to get previous episodes or make sure you don't miss future ones, check us out, Podcast Central at EWTN.com. As we jump into our conversations with this week's Coast to Coast, Fierce is talking about how we can stay focused on the task at hand. I know if you're like me, multitasking is probably an art form, but refocusing ourselves for our mind and our spiritual growth. Let's dive into this week's episode of Fierce on Catholics Coast to Coast.
This season, we're talking about the IT factor, the toolbox of attributes beyond your skills, drills, and stats.
Whether you're looking to be a standout recruit, a leader on your team, or be an influence beyond your athletic career, these topics will help you become the best athlete and person you can be.
We're going deep to discuss how to grow in virtue and strength, ultimately becoming a fierce athlete. Welcome back, everybody. This week, we're going to be talking about focus. I have with me Samantha and Danae, and we're just going to get right into it. So let's start with, what is focus?
I mean, it's pretty self-explanatory, I think, in a lot of regards. But something that I think is key to having focus is you have a goal. Mm-hmm. There's something that you want to achieve, whether that's in your sports career, in your personal life, in your academic life, and everything you do, right, becomes kind of honed in on that goal, and oriented towards that goal. And I think focus with major goals has to kind of pervade all aspects of your life.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, focus, I think we've all been in that game or that situation where things for some reason are just spiraling, maybe, like maybe your team's having a rough time and like, it's something we've all heard, like, your coach telling you, like, get focused, like
stay focused.
Yeah, like redirect. But Sam, I think you're right. It is all coming back to having a goal, right? And then, mid-game, maybe that's, hey, our goal is to win. Yeah. Let us come back together, refocus, kind of shake off mistakes that may have happened and refocus. Taking that time out, regathering, focusing on our goal to win the game and what we have to do to accomplish that goal.
Yeah. I also feel like you have to have a lot of self-control when it comes to having focus. I know for me personally, I'm working with my spiritual director right now, and we're talking about how the first step in terms of like achieving your goals is to be aware and pay attention. So stopping for a second and thinking about your thoughts, and is this going to make me go towards the higher, or is it going to keep me where I'm at?
I like that pay attention, because we were talking earlier, the idea of focus, it is self-explanatory, so we have to be focused to reach our goals, but what is I guess, pulling us away from that focus is just all of the distractions, that are everywhere around us, and that like pay attention, that like be in the present moment and kind of tackle what's right in front of you, I think is a huge life lesson, something that we have to just keep relearning how to take one step in front of the another and tackle that first thing in front of us. Pay attention, stay focused on what's right in front of you.
Yeah. And you make a good point, right? Our world is probably more full of distractions than it ever has been before. I mean, I'm just even thinking of the simple example of you're at your game, and now you have like media clips being played before and after. You're being constantly filmed for social media. You have fans there. You have all the advertisements and flashing things around you. You have what the other team is doing, how they're reacting, what the ref is doing, how he's acting. In your own mind, you have the distractions of, well, now I have these sponsors that I have to play well for. And that's just surrounding a game. I mean, we look at the greater culture, it's access to social media. It's, the distractions going on if you're in college, what everybody else is doing on their weekends, they're relationships, friendships, boyfriends, there's a lot of things that are competing for our attention.
Definitely.
And, it's like, okay, yeah, I recognize that. Well, how do I just stay focused? Danae, you said it, it's something you actually have to practice.
Yeah, it is definitely something you have to practice. It takes skill to draw your attention away from things that are pulling you from your goal, and to be aware of that.
Straight back to virtue in the idea of it takes practice to create virtue. It's this, it's our muscle. It's repeated movements that is building our ability, our strength. And in this, what we're talking about, our ability to focus. It's not maybe you feel it in class. It's not you start with a 5-hour class and you can just focus the whole thing through. It's almost like you have to build yourself up and make that conscious decision to work at it, to be focused, to set aside those distractions, to allow yourself time to focus.
Right. There's such a mental toughness aspect to this. When you have a goal, right, it's important to create sub goals to reach that goal. But even if you have a goal of winning a game, it's, something that I encourage people to do is to have ways built into their game that you can refocus. So say the ball goes out of bounds, right? Use that, like that is your trigger to take 3 deep breaths, or you have a timeout. That is your trigger to, I always would write things on my wrist just to remind me about my goal or who I was, or, help me stay focused. Again, this is something that we're training. And the cool thing about the brain is in a certain sense, it's kind of like a muscle. It's something called neuroplasticity, that we can actually train our brains to be focused. Now, again, we have, a short attention span that's being developed by things like TikTok and things. So a 5-hour class to a lot of people is hard. I heard from a 14-year-old recently, like, oh, I can barely sit through a full movie because I'm used to the 1-minute clip on TikTok. And it's like, okay, that is your reality. Like that's what you're battling now. Are those things helping you be able to stay focused through an 1.5-hour game? If you can't sit through an 1.5-hour movie, are you going to stay focused through an 1.5-hour game?
Tennis match, am I right?
Oh gosh, whoever just watched the US Open, 3 to 5 hours those games can be.
Yeah. I think the best, talking about focus in the middle of a game, and that's a great thing to think about, versus like a timeout or those spaces when you can pull yourself back in. But it's so in a lot of games, you have that space of, I think the best coaches in sport just talk about like being present, like taking, because you don't eat your full meal in one bite, right? You kind of take small bites. You try to focus like so intensely, so diligently on each and every point, like, or each play. Like, if you focus on each play, and then when the play's over, like, break, rest, reset, and then go back to focusing on the next play, that is when you will maybe piece together a full game of intense focus and probably a win, I would say.
Yeah, and I would think a race.
Yeah, I was thinking that also. We break races down with rowing in terms of 500s. So a full race is 2,000 meters, and you break it down by 500-meter chunks, 4 of them. And when you think about that, it makes it easier for your mind to process, but also your body to respond to that overwhelming feeling of, I don't know physically I can get through 2,000 meters pushing myself that hard. So it allows you to develop different focuses to have the ultimate goal of having the fastest race possible.
And I think that's a great example, right? Okay, so you have a 2,000 meter race. Each 500 meters has a different focus,
Right.
So the first 500, you're out of the gate, you're going real hard, and then you're kind of settle into your race pace, and then each 500 has it. And then, the last 500, it's like all out. You're going hard, so each has its own focus. And I think that's a great kind of small analogy for our greater goals. So say your greater goal is to become a starting player. Okay. That in order to do that, you have to become faster, and you have to have better, you have to work on your shot, and you have to have better ball control. Okay. So that's your big goal. Your sub goals are to become faster, to have better ball control, and have a better shot. Then you can take each of those 3 goals and every week break it down, right? So this week I'm going to do, this amount of extra sprints, and I'm going to do this downhill work to work on my speed. I'm going to do this skill, this set of skills, and I'm going to, go out and shoot 100 free throws after every practice. That's, and then you have a mini focus in order to build to that greater focus. And that big goal becomes then kind of
you're already
manageable, chewable.
Yeah, you're already accomplishing the greater goal, because as you tackle these smaller goals, it sets the foundation for you to be able to reach your big goal.
And I think like focus begets focus. Like you achieve these small things, that's going to help you focus on the next step, right? One play or one goal at a time.
Yeah, I mean, we're always building. Like, we are always, gaining muscle strength. Like, I feel like it's just layering, like focus on focus, right? You don't, even in week to week, as we're going through these attributes, hopefully by the end of week 10, like, we've gained because we're building on each other. And I feel like that's how we kind of approach life, right? You try to tackle small things and to make yourself as whole as you can.
And it's like virtue, right? When you're growing, you're going to grow in that virtue to be able to, because focus requires you to say no to a lot of other things, which I think is something in our culture we don't do well with.
Right.
Saying no to people, saying no to opportunities. But if you have this goal, right? If you have a goal of, I want to get faster, and I'm going to make a goal to get up at 6 a.m. and run extra sprints. Well, then the night before, when somebody asks you to hang out, you have to say no, because you know that you have to get a good night's sleep, or you see that you're tired throughout the week and it's affecting negatively your goals. Well, then I have to make a goal to sleep 8 hours a night. Everybody should be doing that. We live in a very sleep deprived culture. Seriously, very sleep deprived culture. The number one reducer of stress is 8 hours of sleep at night. Sorry, I'm getting off my pedestal on that one. But, and in the distractions of the college culture, the distractions to really your soul, and we'll shift to the theology in a second, but, you have on the college campus, or even in high schools, even in the greater culture, when you're not striving for just a greater holiness, what's competing for your attention? It's drinking, it's sex, it's power, it's money. Like, those 4 things are really like trying to distract our souls from our eventual goal.
Yeah. Of heaven. I mean, that is our ultimate goal. and it should be, so how are we breaking down kind of our sports life, but also our individual life and our spirituality? How are we growing? Are we writing down goals, like to get to heaven? I mean, what is our game plan? I mean, we have to kind of approach it with a game plan.
And getting to heaven is a lifelong journey. So you have to break it down in order to get there. Like you can't.
It's a little overwhelming.
One day you can't just be like, I'm going to heaven, like because there's multiple steps that need to be taken to be able to get there.
Mm-hmm. And that can be overwhelming, right? You look at that and you're like, wait, what?
Yeah.
But the beauty of that goal is you have the Lord with you in it.
Yes.
So it's not, well, I mean, I'm going to get to heaven and this is how he wants me to get there. I'm going to choose these goals. It's okay, Lord, what is your will for my life? I desire to be with you in eternity. How do you desire for me to get there? And he's laid out a pretty beautiful path of the commandments and scripture and the sacramental life that'll help us get there. But each of us individually has our own path. We have our own struggles we have to overcome, our own areas we need to grow in virtue, but also our own strengths and our own ways that the Lord is calling us to serve him in order to grow closer to him, and also in order to bring other people into just even the framework of, wow, my life's not all about me and achieving, money and power and fame. It's about this ultimate goal of heaven.
Yeah, absolutely. And I am so thankful that he is like merciful too, because I mean, we're talking about focus and how easy, whether it's in class, in that longer class or in our sport, that our mind is just not focused, and we're distracted. And oftentimes I feel myself in prayer or whether I'm at mass, like wandering, so I thank the Lord for his mercy and just his desire for, to just pull us back closer to him. And he's so forgiving and loving.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Something that a spiritual director kind of told me that was so helpful is he encouraged me to identify in terms of this, right? Because how many times do we go to mass and we totally are somewhere else when the consecration is going on? Like we're mentally thinking about practice or right. The readings have gone by and we don't even know what they were about. Right. So in regards to that, but also in regards to how many times we go into prayer or we try to pray and it ends up, we're thinking about this and we're thinking about that person. We're thinking about all the things we have to do. So what he told me is identify your primary, your secondary, and your tertiary distractions. So what are the primary three things, the top three things that compete for your attention when you enter prayer? And it might take you going into prayer. Like say I want to pray 15 minutes of silent prayer. Something I would encourage everybody to do. Get 15 minutes of just not reading, not, like it's important to read scripture and do all these things and pray the rosary. But I'm talking about 15 minutes of just you and God, just sitting there, just talking, right? And that is when, oh man, the thoughts come in, the distractions. Identify what those things are. So for me, the first was my phone.
Yeah. Because it'll buzz.
And what does that do? I'm in prayer and all of a sudden, so I stopped bringing my phone and my Apple Watch into prayer. Because it's also when I'm bored in the 15 minutes, what am I going to do? Look at my watch. Make sure nobody needs me. It's 15 minutes, or if you're praying longer, it's okay. The world's not going to end in 15 minutes. And if it does, God's going to take care of you where you're supposed to be anyway. So there you go. So the first is, mine was phone. The second was my to-do list. So I was thinking of all the things I had to do. And the third was other people.
Yeah.
Which is a great thing when God brings people onto my heart. But it's like, okay, I will remember to pray for that person or bless that person. And we kind of put it aside. Or the to-do list. Sometimes I would just, in the beginning, I would go through my whole to-do list in my mind and I'll just give it to Mary or give it to the Lord and say, okay, there's all that. Now let's like really talk. But those were my three things. But being aware of them allowed me to, it's like, oh, when I see one creeping up, it's like, oh no, that's one of my distractions. Let's refocus here.
Being aware of them allowed you to try to avoid them so that you could increase your focus. How to increase your focus? Silence. I think that's huge.
Yeah.
You brought up silence and prayer and just throughout the day, because we do not get a lot of that.
No. And right. We've talked about the body and the soul affect each other. if I have a peaceful, silent soul, it's going to allow the rest of my life to be balanced and focused. And I guarantee you that.
And finding that peace will help you to focus. And I mean, that will just seep into every part of your day, whether you're in practice, whether you're playing a game, whether you're at mass or whether you're in prayer, you know, or even just hanging out with friends. Like, you are more focused on them and building that relationship, which again is all pointing us towards that ultimate goal of heaven.
Yeah. So as we wrap up, we would just love to give you our verse, and then we got a takeaway, but I just decided I'm going to add another takeaway.
Okay.
So that's a little bit of a
curveball
for the ladies next to me. But I'm excited about it. So here we go.
All right. So we have 1 Peter chapter 5, verse 8. Discipline yourselves, keep alert. Like a roaring lion, your adversary, the devil, prowls around, looking for someone to devour.
And that's the reality. Like, when we get distracted, one of the devil's biggest tactics is distraction.
And that
it totally is.
Yeah, and that next line, I believe it reads like, resist him.
Yeah.
It says resist him, solid in your faith.
And what is, that's
resist
what we're
him,
doing.
like refocus, bring your focus back to prayer, back to growing in your faith.
Yeah. Okay, would you like to give our first takeaway, and then I'm going to throw the curveball takeaway in?
All right, this is fun. Our first takeaway is just a challenge for this week. Set goals. You know, it's hard to be focused if you don't have a focal point. You know, we need to be moving in a direction towards something. So set a long-term goal for yourself, and then set 3 short-term goals that will help you accomplish eventually that long-term goal for this week. Ooh, that was a tongue twister.
Yeah, and write those goals somewhere.
Yeah, so you can see them every day. Keep yourself accountable. Tell somebody else. Tell your friend.
Yeah, you can. I love like a good dry erase marker on the mirror.
Yes,
that's a good one. Sticky notes.
I love I'm a
sticky notes.
I'm a sticky note.
Put it on your door.
So you see it a couple times a day.
Yep.
So that's our first. So long-term goal and 3 short terms for the week. Mine is a social media fast. Like, I was just thinking, like, why are we such a distracted society? And all it took was you saying, be present with your friends. And it's like, how many times do I go to a restaurant and I see just people sitting across from each other on their phones?
It hurts my heart.
It hurts.
It does hurt.
It hurts. So whether that's setting a literal physical, time limit on your social media on your phone, I have that. Or it's like, you know what, this week I'm gonna fast from social media for the week.
Yeah.
And really see what that allows you to then focus on. But it also will allow you with your long-term goals. You didn't spend 6 hours on TikTok today. Somebody said that recently. 6 hours on TikTok, they found out, in a day. You didn't spend even an hour on TikTok when you could have been sleeping, studying, out practicing more, doing something that would help you achieve your final goal.
Curveball takeaway,
Great
Sam.
curveball
I love
takeaway.
that.
You're welcome. Sometimes you just get inspired, and then you're able to hear the Spirit because you're focused.
I actually have an app if anybody wants to use it, in terms of, because I am constantly on a social media fast. It's called Days Without. And at first you type in like what you're like essentially like fasting from. It was for smoking, like, originally. So you can see like how many days you've gone without it. And I think right now I'm like on like day 90 something without it.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Are you happier without social media?
I'm so much happier. And the other thing too is that at first I was very conscious of how many days I was at, because I was like, ooh, I was just like, well, I want to go on it, like, and stuff like that. So I would look and I'd be like, oh, it's only been 3 days. But now I'm not even aware of it. Don't even miss it.
Well, it becomes a habit at that point. Yeah. Cool. Well, this has been fun. This has been a nice, focused, short podcast. Please leave us a review. Please leave us a comment. Please help, share your goals with us. We'd love to hear what you are making as a goal for a long term, ultimately heaven, but also your athletic goals and how you're breaking those down. And if you need some social media fasting accountability, I think when we release this episode,
here.
we'll make it fasting week, right? We got you. So thank you all for listening. God bless you. You know, we're praying for you, and we will see you next time.
Working together physically, mentally, and spiritually through the verse of 1 Peter 5:18, where we discipline ourselves, learning to be like roaring lions. If you want more on this episode from Fierce, or maybe things you might have missed, check us out, Podcast Central at EWTN.com/radio, so you don't miss what's to come, and also to share it with your friends and subscribe wherever you like to listen to podcasts. I am Ace McKay. When Catholics Coast to Coast returns, Adventures in Imperfect Living helps us to understand what we can learn from life when it gets hacked, and literal and spiritual. We'll get to that coming up next on Catholics Coast to Coast.
The destination for great Catholic audio programming is EWTN Podcast Central, featuring the best of EWTN radio, as well as faith-filled podcasts from our friends and affiliates across the nation, all in one place, all free. If it's central to the faith, you can find it on EWTN Podcast Central. It's like podcast heaven. Visit EWTN.com/radio/podcast today.
Hey folks, welcome to another episode of the program. My name is Greg Willits from RosaryArmy.com.
And I'm Jennifer Willits, his wife.
Hope you're doing well. Make sure, if you haven't already, to subscribe to this channel. Just click the little buttons and the notifications and all that thing. We love hearing comments from you. We've gotten some really nice comments recently from folks, and it's always very edifying.
And this is the value of making real life friends in real life places, because these
as they're listening
on
to
YouTube,
as they're listening to people that they've never probably met before.
Okay, but
take advice from us, but not from all of the other imaginary people in your life.
But there are real life people in your little circle. Okay, there is value to making deposits, using a financial term here, making deposits in real friendships, because one day you might actually need their help, and they're there for you. And so I knew I had a friend on the inside of my bank, and I just went to him saying, listen, I think I'm in trouble. I didn't even know I was, but it's like, I think something is compromised. Will you please check my accounts? We're on the way to go. We're on the way to meet you. But in the meantime, I don't want to waste any time. And that was a very good move that I made, because obviously he stopped everything. He checked it, and he saw problems right away that needed to be fixed. And so they were like Greg just said, they were fixing things, and nothing was taken.
And from my perspective,
that was awesome.
The good move I made was when I came out and said, get all your stuff. We're going to the bank now. Because, and I did that, quite honestly, I was motivated by selfishness in that, no, hold on.
What do you mean?
In that, it was a Friday afternoon at 3:00. I knew that banks closed no later than 5, but most likely are going to stop at 4. And if we had to go into the weekend,
that's it,
afraid that something treacherous was happening, every second counted. And I was afraid of my mental state by Sunday at 3:00 in the afternoon if I didn't have answers to what was just happening.
Right.
You know, so it was very much to make sure that I did. Oh, and then wasn't that was that leading up to Martin Luther King that Monday as well? Was that the Monday, or was the Monday before Martin Luther King? Maybe
I don't know.
Because then it would have been another bank holiday.
Oh no, that already happened.
Okay,
that already happened. So I was. But meanwhile, while this event we were in the throes of it, I felt awful. I felt like I did a bad thing. I mean, this was the noise in my head. And I'm like, okay, but I too had to remind myself, but what is true? What are lies and what are truth? Nothing actually was breached. There was a threat of a breach, but no breach happened in the end because it was stopped. So everything's okay.
No, there was a breach.
The breach occurred,
but we were able to.
But nothing leaked out.
Yeah.
Nothing leaked out of the breach.
The intruder came into the house, but we were able to get them out of the house.
Right. So yeah, if you imagine like a robber, he opened the window, and that's as far as it went.
I don't know.
He opened the window.
He had a foot in.
He may have it, but yeah, the window was shut.
He had a foot and almost on the floor.
So what was really good about this is, especially for me, like, you're more knowledgeable about how hackers operate. They have a playbook. I didn't know the playbook. I didn't know. I didn't know what they were capable of. I didn't know to the extent that it would happen. I didn't know about spoofing phone calls. I didn't know that a fraudster can take a business phone number and put it in their caller ID so that when you look at your phone, it'll bypass the fraudulent scam. It'll see it as a legitimate phone number that your phone recognizes, that you will recognize, and that you can Google and confirm that it is, in fact, a valid phone number.
Yeah.
So I didn't know that was going to happen. So anyway, all that to say, I was so grateful. And in the end, I think I feel all the better for it. I feel so encouraged and so blessed because I know God has got my back. You know, I know that, yes, while people around you can also help you and they have your back, but God has our back because we are part of his faithful. And so I started researching more good news about this whole attack. And that is, the enemy has a playbook. And we know what the playbook is because the scriptures that we can read anytime tell you the playbook. And so we now know what the enemy will use, which is lies, deception, to try to get your guard down, to make you feel afraid, to make you feel like God is nowhere, to make you feel like you're alone. But all of that is a lie. It is a lie. And so I had to remind myself of the truth. And boy, when you remind yourself of the truth of God's words, you do feel better. I feel so much better now because now I'm more fortified. I now know what the tricks are, and so I can better evade them, use my God-given intelligence to not be fooled again.
I think some of what you just described is, in a way, grace in action, right? So we went through a difficult situation, and we all have difficult situations that are going to happen to us. Are we pre-fortified to deal with those situations? You could easily see, had we not had our relationship with Jesus Christ through his Blessed Mother, through total consecration, all the work, for example, that we did this year with total consecration and thinking about it so much and meditating and praying about, Mary, help me see your son and his suffering and bring me to him, help me to become more like Christ. Had we not done that, how much easier it would have been at the moment of the attack to immediately fall into what? Into despair. Rather than scratching as much as we can on, to get to the top of the cliff of hope and to hold on to whatever hope we can possibly hold on to and hold on to whatever trust. I could easily see how it would be easy to slip into that. One of the other things that I have noticed is, so it's been a couple of months since I've actually had an opportunity to go to confession. Tried to go this past weekend and it didn't happen. I've been wanting to go. Not that I'm necessarily in a state of mortal sin, but I am very much feeling not empty of grace, but very much a depletion of the grace of the sacrament of reconciliation. What this incident brought forward were some of the areas of my tendency to sin. So I actually just talked to my therapist about this morning. The level of anger. Well, he placated me and said, okay, but this is a righteous anger that you're feeling right now. I said, yeah, but I said, I'm going to be 100% honest. I was imagining wanting to do violence upon this person who did this to us. Mm-hmm. So it went beyond just, how dare you do this, to, if I saw this guy wanting to take him by, the shirt and just go and bash his face in. I don't know if I actually would, but there's a great desire and temptation to do that. Well, what does that show, right? That showed an area that I still need to work on. Great level of forgiveness. I need to be continually working on levels of trust, even more trust of God, of being able to have that greater level of empathy that you talked about. There's just a lot of things where an increase in virtue probably would have served me well in this particular moment. So these incidences can not only help you to grow closer to Jesus in your dependency upon him, but it can also help you to grow closer to Jesus in that it can show and expose areas where we need to grow in virtue, grow in holiness, and areas where perhaps we were lacking. So next time, God forbid it happens again, But if some other circumstance where we feel a betrayal of trust occurs, what am I going to do between now and then that I am seeking out a greater level of grace? Perhaps not wait 2 months between confessions, perhaps deliberately praying about God. This revealed in me a heightened level of anger that I didn't realize I possessed. So how do I become more meek like Jesus? How do I become more forgiving like Jesus? How do I take what happened and how do I allow the negative to transform into a positive? And that's always difficult. And I remember when we were on the radio years ago, and we would say this phrase, and it rang true at the time. And I don't know what happened in the last 10 years. I think just because of circumstances, my own belief in what we used to say kind of got watered down. But I still think there was a great amount of wisdom in what we used to say. People would call our radio program and share with us the most horrible things that were happening in their lives, death or loss of a child or whatever it might be, and just great struggles. And I remember saying to countless people, how much God must love you to give you a cross so heavy. And the thinking behind it is that, well, think about how heavy was the cross that God allowed his son Jesus to carry, that had upon it the weight of all of the sins of the world. And how great is the love of God the Father for Jesus Christ the Son. And so when we are given crosses, we're given the opportunity to be a little bit more like Jesus. So how much God the Father is showing us his love, not by taking the crosses away, which he does sometimes, but sometimes allowing us to carry the crosses so that we can become more like Jesus. His love for us is so great that he longs for you to be more like his son, because he wants to love you in the way that he loves his son, which is completely, totally, and 100% in all things. And he wants you to be able to love as his son does, which is 100% completely and totally. And so those things get wrapped up in, when a bad thing happens, when a person hurts you, when a bad situation happens, when a death occurs, a senseless death, an unexpected event, getting laid off from your job, an unexpected divorce. These are all things that people in our circle are dealing with right now. How heavy those crosses are, how much God loves you to give you a cross so heavy. And one of the things that those crosses can do is not only help you to grow in the virtue, but help you to grow in your trust of God. And sometimes God puts heavy crosses on us so that we can finally have the realization of how dependent we are upon God, because we know I cannot carry this cross alone. He's never asking us to carry the cross alone. Those are a lot of the things that were going through my head. It exposed a weakness. It exposed several weaknesses for me. And I think that I've kind of slipped into a little bit of melancholy over the last few days because I don't like what I see in some of my reactions, particularly my thoughts. And so this exposed those things. And so part of me wants to get angry at the scammer all over again. Just like, see what you're making me feel right now. It's like, well, but maybe you've done me a service.
Right. And a lot of the last couple of days have given me time to sort of further reflect on actually something that we did a show maybe the last 2 years when we spoke with Father Timothy Gallagher for the book Spiritual Exercises, Discernment of Spirits, as promoted by St. Ignatius.
Yeah, but he's a spiritual
exercise.
Yeah, Father Timothy Gallagher, he's done a whole bunch of Discernment of Spirits books.
Okay. But on one of them, it was another description of a playbook of how the enemy likes to attack us, beat us down, but also how God is constantly trying to bring you back and how he's also trying to keep you on the path of righteousness. And so I was reminding myself of some of the discernment of spirits to refresh my mind on, okay, what are some of the tactics again of the enemy? Because if you don't really read it that often, you might actually forget, and then your guard is down. But one that actually made me feel a little bit affirmed was this tactic here that I'll share with you. When the fundamental direction of a person's life is moving toward God, then the enemy's tactic is to bite, sadden, place obstacles, and rob the peace with lies on that person. Okay, that's from St. Ignatius. When you have a person who's basically toward God, he's living for God, he's in a good place, when you're that person, the enemy is going to attack by biting you, robbing you of your peace, and making you feel like, see, God isn't with you. God isn't with you. And I thought, that was a little bit of what happened to what I perceived to happen to us in the last couple of days. And so with that, it led me on another, not a rabbit trail, but going back on God's words, because Ephesians chapter 6, verses 10 through 20 is a wonderful description of the armor of God. It's the whole armor of God. And in Ephesians, I knew it was in there, but it was this reminder of, okay, why is it armor? Why is it called armor? Because we're in battle. We're in spiritual battle. We need to protect ourselves from the enemy because the enemy fights dirty. And so I reread those scriptures once again. And in fact, if you permit me, I'll read it now. If you haven't heard this in a while, it's a great reminder of the armor of God, but also how the enemy fights. And it's only like 10 scriptures, so it won't take long.
10 scriptures.
10 verses
okay.
in this scripture. Okay, this is Ephesians chapter 6, verses 10 through 20. Finally, be strong in the Lord and in the strength of his might. Put on the whole armor of God, that you may be able to stand against the wiles of the devil. For we are not contending against flesh and blood, but against the principalities, against the powers, against the world rulers of this present darkness, against the spiritual host of wickedness in the heavenly places. Therefore, take the whole armor of God, that you may be able to withstand in the evil day, and having done all, to stand. Stand, therefore, having fastened the belt of truth around your waist, and having put on the breastplate of righteousness, and having shod your feet with the equipment of the gospel of peace. Besides all these, taking the shield of faith, with which you can quench all the flaming darts of the evil one, and take the helmet of salvation and the sword of the Spirit, which is the word of God. Pray at all times in the Spirit with all prayer and supplication. To that end, keep alert with all perseverance, making supplication for all the saints, and also for me, that utterance may be given me in opening my mouth boldly to proclaim the mystery of the gospel, for which I am an ambassador in chains, that I may declare it boldly as I ought to speak. So, and then that scripture led to the final one that I would love to share with you, because the Psalms are amazing. And there's like a psalm, I feel like, for every emotional situation that we feel. But what I really wanted to be reminded of in these last couple of days of was God's assurance that he's got me. And sometimes when you feel attacked, the lie is that no one is protecting you. That's the lie that you want to believe. But scripture tells you the truth. And it can be found in this particular psalm of Psalm 121, which is 8 amazing verses of assurance, which I will share with you now. I lift up my eyes to the hills. From where does my help come? My help comes from the Lord, who made heaven and earth. He will not let your foot be moved. He who keeps you will not slumber. Behold, he who keeps Israel will neither slumber nor sleep. The Lord is your keeper. The Lord is your shade on your right hand. The sun shall not strike you by day, nor the moon by night. The Lord will keep you from all evil. He will keep your life. The Lord will keep your going out and your coming in from this time forth and forevermore.
My help is in the name of the Lord, who made heaven and earth. That was something that that particular phrase was something that I never heard on a regular basis until we moved to Colorado. And then Father Jim, who was the vocations director at the time, whenever, and his office was on the same floor as mine, and sometimes he would join us for praying the Angelus or something like that, or some other thing that we were doing. And whenever he would lead a prayer, we'd get to the end of it. He always said, "Our help is in the name of the Lord." I remember at first going,
What do I say?
"What is this?"
This is like an advanced Catholic test.
And then and then praying the Liturgy of the Hours on a regular basis. You read that psalm on a frequent basis. Our help is in the name of the Lord who made heaven and earth.
Who made heaven and earth. So one thing that I didn't tell you was I actually went back to the bank today. I had a little bit more business to conduct. And I saw that same wonderful gentleman who helped us so much the other day when we were going through this terrible scam situation. And he was so happy and eager to help me. And he goes, guess what? A couple days ago, another lady came in here. The same exact thing happened to her. She got the phone call, emails, all under the guise of being this banking institution. And I just thought, wow, that's way too soon. That's what I thought. This was like a crazy event. So yeah, please be on guard.
One of the things that we did immediately after, because you start. Here's the other nefarious thing, right? In a situation like this, it's so easy when you are the victim to want to place additional blame on yourself, more blame than is even necessary. So I immediately was like, okay, so they were able to get a lot of personal information about us. So what happened? How did that happen? And, when we went to Columbus just recently, and again, I need to come up with a better word than paranoid. I'm just cautious, right? I'm very cautious. So when we were at the airport, I normally don't get on public Wi-Fi systems. But for whatever reason, I just did. Oh, well, I know why. Because our flight was delayed like 6 hours. And I'm just like, I don't even care anymore. I mean, that really was kind of my idea. And I'm like, I wanted to watch this. I want to finish watching this documentary I was watching. I'm just going to hop on the public Wi-Fi and watch this, right?
Okay, well, that doesn't seem bad.
And at one point, I paused and I went to the restroom and I came back. When I came back, I walked past a guy on his laptop. And he had his laptop open. And I just saw he was a coder. I just saw all sorts of code. I don't know what he was coding, but I could just, I recognized a screen of what a coder screen looks like. And I immediately went, this is the kind of thing where people can sit in public areas where there's a public Wi-Fi and there is software and there are methodologies for scanning network traffic on a given network. If you're on the network, that traffic can be scanned. And so someone could be looking and keeping track of every website that you go onto, every place, or and there are ways of capturing what you're doing. And you'll see this like even in your own neighborhood, for example, right? Pull up your Wi-Fi. How many of your neighbors' Wi-Fi systems or printers pop up?
Oh, that's true.
And you'll see printers of your neighbors, like, printing paper, right? And oftentimes, if you look at the Wi-Fi, there's no lock next to it. Theoretically, it would not be difficult for you to jump on your neighbor's printer and print something to them. You could freak them out. You could do terrible things. I'm watching you. Bzzz. I mean, how much would you freak out if that happened, right?
Yeah.
So it's prudent to secure things down. So I'd gone back and forth. When I saw that guy, I immediately, when I got back to sitting down next to you after seeing that guy with the open laptop, I was like, this is so stupid. I just broke one of my own rules of jumping on a public Wi-Fi like that. And I closed everything. I closed everything down. I closed down all my apps. I knocked off the network, and I wasn't going to do that again. And so I'm thinking, and then we just were in a hotel as well. Well, in a hotel, you don't have to log into the network. You go through a little bit of a system, but pretty much everyone is on the same network within a hotel. So there's something called a virtual private network, a VPN, and there's a lot of systems and services that you can get to do that. And there's different YouTube channels I'll watch where they talk about different ones. And one guy who I watch who has millions of followers, Colin Furze over in England, he always has as a sponsor Surfshark. I can't imagine this guy would have Surfshark as a sponsor if it wasn't a decent system. And you go and look at the reviews, lots of people. So I immediately signed up for Surfshark. I have since signed up as an affiliate, but I don't have an affiliate code yet. Not that it'll matter. I don't really care about that as much. But if you're looking for ways of protecting yourself, I mean, again, prudence goes a long way, right? Just some simple, what do they say? An ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure or something like that,
Yeah,
right?
that sounds right.
And it's the same kind of thing. It's like just being smart about your passwords. Do you have a password protocol? Do you have different passwords for every website that you visit? It doesn't have to be hugely different. You're like, oh, I got 60 different websites. Well, so do we. But we have a methodology for generating passwords that we know, but we're going through the process of changing all those now because of what happened, and do that on a frequent basis. For us, it's been a couple of years since we updated all of our passwords, so we were about due. And make sure that you have a protocol for taking care of those kinds of things. And I think the same kinds of things. Just it's amazing how an incident like this makes you think about what's your health protocol. How much are you taking care of? How many bullet point checkpoint marks are you doing right now to take care of your health? What's your maintenance schedule on your house and your car? I mean, think about it. What did we just have done? We just had our windows cleaned. Why? Because we've been here 5 years and our windows were a mess and they needed to be cleaned. And it's like, and I keep trying to clean them, and I can only go so far before I need some help to do that. I know in my mind it makes sense what I'm trying to say, but it's like we need checkup points in our lives. I mean, there's spiritual checkups. We're talking about going on a retreat. After a while, I need to go on a retreat because I need a spiritual reset and a checkup. Yeah. And so that's another one of those things I was thinking about in terms of all these things that are happening. What are the areas in your life that needs a checkup right now and maybe needs a bit of a clean slate reset? And this just kind of woke me up in that regard. So,
well, yeah, I definitely feel more awake than ever before now that I know how bad it can be. But again,
I keep getting a text from a guy named Mac Barron. I don't trust him at all. I just keep saying, "Who are you? Leave me alone." Right. Blocked.
When I was reading Ephesians, and I was reading the particular verse about the principalities, the powers, this present darkness. Yeah. I wanted to add, through email, through text messages, the devil will use technology and fight you there and try to get you there.
Well, I'm surprised you didn't use the analogy that you keep using over the weekend of the Garden of Eden.
Well, that's what I was just getting ready to share that. That was probably the first thing that I thought of. I went to Eve at the tree talking to that snake because the snake, a.k.a. Satan, had a limit. He's like, all Satan could do is tempt Eve, but he needed Eve to actually take the apple and eat it. So the whole point was that Satan needed Eve to do something because he could not do it all. He could not force her and make her sin. He could just tempt her into doing it. So it's like, okay, that's the limit. So the limit that the scammers use is very similar. They try to get you to act. They can only go so far and dangle a little carrot in front of you and try to present you with enough distorted truth to make you believe it's real because they're trying to get you to click on something, to give something to them so that they could finish and rob and steal and whatever they want to do. And so I know, like what you're saying, that you pride yourself on knowing how to be, diligent and safeguard your protection of your things.
And pride. Got to work on pride.
Okay. You pride yourself. Myself. Well, there's got to be a better word for that.
See,
pride is so bad.
It keeps exposing other weaknesses.
Like I know never to share my password. I know that. I know this. They got it out of me anyway because they tricked me completely. And I felt like, oh man, Eve was also tricked into thinking that it was good. And I was also tricked. And I know, but they made me think. And I had no reference point. I guess that was the other side. I didn't know that.
And you almost got us kicked out of the garden. I'm just saying.
I know.
Once again.
What if this was the one time this verification of a password was needed to save me? And I thought that it was part of the solution. Well, now I know 100% of the time You will never, ever, 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 ever need to surrender a password under any circumstances with a bank.
Learning from our mistakes, especially when life gets hacked. That is Adventures in Imperfect Living. If you go to Podcast Central at EWTN.com/radio, you can catch up. Remember to let God define who you are, and I'll see you again on Catholics Coast to Coast.